This interview, I speak with Samsara, who is also a podcaster, a playwright and a director, and is immersed in the Melbourne Arts scene. Samsara talks eloquently about her experiences as someone with a disability, PTSD, anxiety and depression, and how COVID-19, lockdown and the public's response to the management of the virus affected her. We also have a really in-depth chat about the lower socio-economic demographic of Melbourne, the welfare system of Australia, and how the federal government supported vulnerable people during the pandemic. You'll hear all about the culture of one of the quintessential Melbourne suburbs, Brunswick, famous for its coffee, multiculturalism and diversity. Samsara provides an enormous amount of insight and information for fellow humans in compromised situations, dealing with isolation and adversity. There's even a few tips for those people operating mobility scooters, and a huge plug for the importance of the arts. I'm sure you'll learn many things listening to Samsara's story. Hi Samsara, and welcome to Lockdown, Stories from Inside. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us today.
Hi Amanda, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure.
Thank you for hearing me.
Yeah, I know, in this audio podcast. So let's talk about where you live in metropolitan Melbourne, just your living arrangements and a little bit about the town or the suburb that you live in. Can you describe that for us, please?
Okay, so I'm in Brunswick in Melbourne, which is an inner city suburb, just outside the CBD, but still ridiculously accessible in terms of distance and trains and trams and all that sort of stuff. My suburb is it's an old suburb with the little streets and really bad curb cuts and stuff, but I use a mobility scooter, so those things matter to me. In terms of demographics, we are a real mix because we do have the Housing Commission towers, but we're also, and it has traditionally also been a very arty suburb. So we've got the poor, we've got the artists, but it's also in the process of gentrification. So we've got a whole bunch of kind of younger, wealthy people, lots of new apartment blocks and that sort of stuff happening. So we probably what we don't have is a huge aged population. That's probably the demographic that Brunswick doesn't have a lot of.
Sure. Yeah. So it's more of a young up and coming suburb now. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, young up and coming, but also with a nice little dose of the people who live the hardest lives in city living.
Absolutely. Yeah. Who were affected through this COVID time.
Oh,
immensely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Brunswick is the beginning of the northeast corridor.
Sure.
So if you go one way, you end up in Preston. If you go the other way, you end up in Sunshine kind of direction. Yep. So I mean, officially the split off is really around Footscray, but we're kind of part of the closer North Melbourne split off.
Okay. Yeah. We've actually had someone else on the podcast that I've interviewed from Seddon, which is near Footscray too.
Oh, yes.
We're sort of moving around. We're moving around that metropolitan inner city, those little suburbs that kind of sit well within that CBD area, but so they're quite suburban in a way, aren't they? They're quite homely.
Oh, totally. I mean, this is if you ever described Melbourne inner city living, this Brunswick is probably the epitome. Brunswick and Fitzroy are probably the epitome of what we imagine: arty, young, still poor, but with potential wealth.
Yeah.
Very great cafes.
Absolutely. Good coffee. Absolutely. Which is so important in Melbourne. Definitely. So what do you think the main political inclinations are in your suburb of Brunswick or around that area?
Oh, we're probably very we're left-leaning. I think arty. We're it's interesting because we've got a big ethnic population in this corridor as well. So there's a lot of small businesses and that sort of thing, run by people with English as a second language, which is not really the same thing as small businesses. Say, I used to live in South Yarra and that sort of area, and it's a very different feel to businesses that are run by people with English as a first language.
Sure, yeah.
So it's a little bit tougher. It's a little bit more sense of independence, and whilst it's very arty and that, it's kind of not mainstream.
No,
it's an area that isn't pop. It's not mainstream. It's not conservative, but it's aspirational.
Sure. Yeah.
Which, yeah.
Tends to lean towards the left a little bit more.
Absolutely. Our state member is Labor. The arts program in our local council, which is Moreland, is very, very strong. There's a lot of focus on community programs and that sort of stuff. So it's
absolutely.
It's
quite
very
progressive.
left-leaning. It's very socialist, not socialist, but with socialistic tendencies.
Yes, I understand. Yeah, definitely. And there's that sort of a little bit more of an environmental focus too. So work.
Yeah, exactly.
So kind of working class ish, but with a bit of a left green.
Yeah, it's not as green as inner city Melbourne.
No.
But which is but definitely those tendencies. Moreland is a council that, like Yarra Council and Darebin, have removed doing the nationalisation ceremonies on Australia Day because it's offensive to, our Indigenous population. So, they're kind of it's that sense of bravery and idealism.
Yeah, sure. And progressive thinking. Absolutely. I was just going to touch base with you about the cultures that are present that you're talking about. There's quite a lot of ethnic, cultural diversity in your area. What kind of cultures are present there? What kind of backgrounds do they come from?
Okay, it's not Asian, it's not Italian. We've kind of got Lebanese, we've got Afghan, we've got not so much the African population either. It is very much that Middle European. I think,
sure. Yes.
A lot of we have lots of kebab shops. And Afghani restaurants and Moroccan restaurants and things like that. So it's kind of Middle European-ish kind of thing.
That sounds familiar to me. I have had friends that have lived in those areas, and there's always these beautiful olive trees growing in their gardens, and they've got that real sense of food production. Definitely.
And so we have a lot of halal bakeries and that sort of stuff. So it's all very much, I guess, I wouldn't call this I guess it is religious. It's not a super religious area, but I would say we've probably got a very good proportion of Muslims in our electorate.
Sounds like it. Absolutely. Great. Okay, so socio-economic status, we just sort of touch on this question quickly around what your neighbourhood would be described as in terms of high, middle or low. I know it's difficult to sort of ascertain because there's a lot of variety, but generally speaking, what do you think the demographic would be in your area socioeconomically?
I think, I'm in East Brunswick or Lower Brunswick, actually. It's a bit confusing. I'm not in East Brunswick. I'm in Lower Brunswick. So Lower Brunswick is probably, low middle class.
Sure, yes.
In the process of gentrification. But at the moment, we're probably low middle class with a smattering of poor.
Nice. All right. Thank you. And your own household, does that fit into that similar category?
Yes, definitely. I'm straddling the boundaries of, actually, I'm probably technically poor, but I pretend I'm not in the Housing Commission. I actually have a private flats, and really, really lovely landlords who aren't pricing me out of it yet.
Okay. The weekly household income to be considered technically poor, which is or low income, is $650 or less a week. If you jump up to that $700 bracket, that means you're classified based on the Census of Population and Housing of 2016. You're classified as middle. So obviously, there's not a lot of
that's why I'm saying straddling.
Yeah,
because I'm on New Start with disability,
okay,
which puts me as poor. Yeah. But if and when I get any paid work, I cross over into what would technically be middle.
Sure, yeah. Do you want to explain for overseas listeners a little bit about what New Start with the disability as it's a pension? So would you like to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, okay. So it's very, very hard to get a disability pension in Australia these days. It's almost impossible. Anyway, so New Start, well, actually it's now called Job Seeker. Sorry, yeah. So it's our version of unemployment benefits, which is less than disability. I have partial disability. So I'm considered I'm on Job Seeker, but basically what the disability status gives me is, I get a different pension card, which gives me a few more concessions.
Sure.
And it also, I have less, if I get some work, it's easier for me to come back onto unemployment if something goes wrong with a job or something, or if I get sacked or whatever. Yeah, it's just a bit less of it's more expected that I will not succeed in the employment market.
Okay, yeah, got it. So you get certain concessions which are kind of decreased rates for things like water bills and things like that. Just a few extra helping hand
public
in
transport concessions.
Yeah.
I get medical. I get a medical allowance of $5 or something, $6 every fortnight because I use medication.
And so bulk billing as well when you go to the doctor.
Yes, access to bulk billing for medical visits.
Sure.
And if I need an ambulance, take me to hospital. Have once or twice, then it's free.
Yeah, great. So, yeah, I think it's really interesting that we're talking about this because I haven't talked about this with anybody else. So thank you for sharing this information. I think it's interesting if overseas listeners are present and just to see how we do things in Australia.
We don't give things away, but we just, when I look at the American model, I just kind of think the thing that I get for this is just that comfort in knowing that when I need medical attention, I can get it, and it won't necessarily, I can't get any elective stuff, but if I need it, I don't ever have to worry that it's not available to me and it's not generally affordable for me.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And it's just a basic the job seeker is just a kind of a minimum wage, kind of basic wage that is received, isn't it? And there's things like sole parent pension as well, which you can receive as a parent in Australia through Centrelink as well, that when you're actually struggling to find work and juggle the needs of children, that's a basic wage as well for people getting on their feet. There's all of these incentives as well to try and get back into the workforce, isn't there, and kind of complement those things.
I mean, they've changed over the last 10 years or so. They've made a lot of changes. For example, as I said, it's harder to get on disability, and that matches up with our new National Disability Insurance Scheme, which is designed to provide people with disability to get back to live full lives, and including getting back into the workforce. So hand in hand, they are supposed to be incentivizing employment for people like me.
Sure.
And with the sole parents benefit, they changed the rules so that basically you don't have to find employment for the first 7 years of your child's life. It used to be right up until the age 16, but now from the age of 7, you do actually have to start engaging in job seeker activities and stuff. So again, that's become incentivized that way. And then we have the seniors pension.
Yes.
So there's less of them now. There used to be widow's pension and all that. There's a carer's pension. So if you care for somebody who's aged or has disabilities, and they all have different amounts attached to them. The lowest is job seeker.
Which is, do you know what it is a week? What's the basic wage of a job seeker person, if you don't mind sharing that information?
No, that's okay. Before COVID-19 lockdown, when it was New Start, before it went into job seeker, it was around $350 to $400 a week.
Yeah, okay. Can we take into consideration the cost of a basic rental?
Yeah.
That's about.
I can give you my stats. I think I actually gave you the wrong amount then.
Okay.
Because so I was getting and I get rent assistance on top of this. So I think I gave you the really wrong number, because I get rent assistance, which is about $120 a week. And I bring home $770 a fortnight, and my rent, which is really good for a single bedroom place in inner city Melbourne, is $1,000 a month. So that was 3/4 of my income on job seeker goes into rent.
Wow. Yeah.
And everything else comes out of that. Now, during COVID, we changed to job seeker, and there was a COVID allowance attached to that. So I was getting around $1,250 a fortnight, which was really nice, to be honest. I was one of the people who kind of got a benefit out of that, because it meant I didn't have to keep asking my mum for money, which is really embarrassing, because she's an age pensioner.
Yeah.
So she's on a pension as well. She just gets more money than I do.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but you're really painting a picture here of how tough it can be, definitely.
And it's dropped down now. Job seeker's dropped, so now I'm getting about $970 a fortnight. That's going to stay through to March now, apparently.
Okay.
And then in theory it goes back to $770. But we'll see what happens.
And we're going to talk a little bit more about what you do for your work as well in a minute. But thank you for sharing that information. It's really interesting. So your living arrangements, you said you're living on your own and in a small flat. Would you describe it as?
Yes, it's a single bedroom flat.
Fantastic. Okay, single bedroom. So let's walk us through your building, or walk us through your flat a little bit.
I'm really lucky I found this one, actually. I'm in a block of flats which has 10 flats in total. It's sort of broken into two. It's got 2 separate entrances though, so there's only 5 units using my entrance, and then the others have another entrance. We now have a security door as our communal door with buzzers. So when I first moved in, basically we had to leave the downstairs door open, and we had a lot of theft and stuff. I've had 3 mobility scooters stolen. So now we have security doors, which is fantastic. We used to have houses either side of us, but on the back side on one side, they're now a set of luxury units.
Okay.
My units are like 70s kind of things with concrete walls and stuff. But got a set of I think it's 4 luxury units with next door. And it's all houses, and I'm on the first floor. There's nothing on the ground floor. It's just car ports.
Okay.
And then there's 2 more stories above me. And I can look out over the housetops and the distance until I see the Housing Commission towers, Department of Housing towers, on one side, and on the other side, I have some units and stuff that are newly built, the new yuppie.
The luxury apartments. Talk to me about
that's
such an interesting contrast, isn't it? Can you tell for people who are outside of Melbourne, who are outside of Victoria even, and may not have the Housing Commission towers in their own cities where they live, talk to us a little bit about that arrangement, those Housing Commission flats as they were called.
Okay, well, they're high density towers, so high density living. They're usually, they're all pretty much full of people who are on government support in some need. They're kind of when you've got nowhere else you can live and can afford to live, that's where the government will put you. There's several of them dotted around Melbourne. They don't make the big, huge estates like you see in America, and when they talk about their housing estates, but it's the same kind of concept, and some of them are quite rough. It's a mixed population. There's a lot of people on drugs. We actually have a lot of people on drugs in this area as well who are evidently welfare dependent.
Right.
But then they also house a lot of our refugee population and stuff.
That's right. So a lot of big families living in fairly small, very big families.
Because they tend to be only, 1 and 2 bedroom. Sometimes there'll be 3, but they're more likely to be bed sits and stuff. There are also a lot of ex-prisoner population are put in there because it's really hard to get on a lease or get in a share house or, get a job.
Yeah, that's right.
once you've gone to jail.
Absolutely. Yeah. And there's quite a few people, as you say, it's quite dense. I'm just wondering how many people.
They're huge here. I grew up in Perth and we had them, and
they're big towers. They're really big, aren't they?
But the ones here in Melbourne are huge. I don't even know how many people. We've got 2 towers here. That are like just near my place. But I reckon that's got to be probably, they look like they're about 500 to 1,000 units.
Yes.
They look huge.
That's right. Yeah, I was just going back to my notes because I actually did a little bit of research in this because there was an enforced lockdown on some of those towers.
Yeah, on some of the towers. Yeah.
I can't find the notes at the moment that say how many people that were living in them, but there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people living in those towers, and they are incredibly dense, and there's not a lot of ventilation, is there? And there's not a lot of space, and there's a lot of people that have English as their second language, as you were saying, and a lot of just a real variety of circumstances just in those big towers. And there's one in Flemington, North Melbourne, Fitzroy, and I think there's another one. Richmond, yeah, of course, yeah. So,
Paran, there's one in Paran. They're dotted all over the place. One of the good things that they did do was that they didn't all just put them, like, just create one big mega estate like they do in or they did in New York, for example. So to me they look huge, but I think a New Yorker would come over and go,
yeah, I'm sure everything's bigger in America than Australia, but absolutely. And the population that we're dealing with in Victoria, 6.6 million people. I think there's about 4.9 million people in Metro Melbourne. It's tiny, really, compared to places like New York, which I think would probably have a sort of a population just in that city akin to our whole country in a way. So, we're dealing with but to us, it's all in context, isn't it? So,
for us, it's also the difference for us is that it is state government owned and run, which is good, and it's also bad because it's a lot of, in fact, it's really interesting because it's hard to get the Department of Health to do maintenance, although with COVID there's possibly more of that. But actually in my block of flats, the flat that's opposite me, we share the landing, is a Department of Health property. They've tried to buy flats and units around as part of normal housing estates to reintegrate people.
Okay.
But it was absolutely horrible because the Department of Health wanted to upgrade the entrance, make a locking door and that sort of stuff, but they won't pay for anything as part of the body corporate. So even though we've got these locked doors in the intercom systems, that flat doesn't have them. So anybody who lives in that flat actually has no way of knowing that they've got visitors and that sort of without calling out and shouting out.
Okay. Yes.
And also they don't have any way of controlling the behaviors of their, like, they can't evict people.
Sure. Yeah.
That's part of why I had 3 mobility scooters stolen. I was assaulted at one point.
Really?
It was really horrible, and they kept saying that they couldn't get them out, but eventually they did. I don't know what happened. It was soon after I made the police report about the assault, so maybe that gave them a way to get them out.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Wow.
But it's really intimidating, and then it affects the kind of people that you have who will rent in the flats.
Sure. The demographic is kind of determined by the culture in which you're living, isn't it?
Yeah. So I mean, it's been much better since they did get them out. And I don't have any issue. I mean, I'm on a pension myself, and I grew up in a welfare family.
Sure.
Grown up in the West Australian version of those things, really.
Right. Yeah.
So, but yeah, this was horrible, and this was some people are just really don't care about themselves and their lives and other people's lives.
Totally. Yeah. Thank you for voicing. Yeah, that's a really valid contribution that you've just made there. Thank you for that information. So moving into the sort of the work-life situation now too, let's just go through what a typical weekday was like for you before 2020 and the sort of the COVID pandemic and the lockdowns in Victoria. Talk us through like maybe, what a typical day was like for you in that time.
Sure. Look, I haven't been officially employed for about 2 years. I had an admin job, but it was project-based and the project ended. But I'm involved in theatre. I am a playwright and a director. And so I have a master's in writing for performance. So I made my own stuff. I'm a theatre critic. So I would go out to see theatre shows 3 or 4 times a week and put them up on my blog. I used to write for some online editorials, but I decided to go independent. I am a podcaster, so I have a regular crew of actors. We would meet up every 2 weeks or so, and we would record scripts together. And it was my aesthetic required us all to be in the same room, my audio aesthetic, to do it. I don't like the close mic fake thing that most podcasts do. I should mention audio fiction. So I don't do the interviewee nonfiction type thing. It's all part of my writing thing. So that obviously means I would spend time writing as well. And I'd go to the movies every so often and I'd look for jobs and have to go into my job search provider to every week to meet, and it was part of this group where we had to do job ready skills, which basically meant socializing, so you're not stuck in your house all the time.
So I'm
a little bit, I don't know, I don't think of myself as hyperactive, but I really can't sit. I mean, I'm not the person that would sit in front of Netflix for ever. I have to have something to do, and so that's how I did it. I had my own activities. I did the podcast. I did the writing. I did the reviewing, and that sort of thing.
And you got out to do those things, and you got amongst
absolutely
it. Yes.
The hardest thing was when theatres closed, and still haven't reopened, and no, I didn't realise until lockdown that was actually really my only reason to leave the flat.
Yeah.
Was actually to go and see theatre.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a major part of the culture.
So when theatre stopped, oh my God.
Wow. Yeah. I know. That has and because you're in that world as well, I mean, yeah, let's talk a little bit about how the arts community has actually changed this year, in more detail, because of the restrictions, because of people not being able to get into the same space with each other and have those ideas flowing in a more natural, organic way. And, you'd be better to describe this than me, obviously. So how has it been affected by, how has the arts community, and particularly in your sort of field, been affected?
Look, I'm going to annoy you because I'm a bit glass half full, but look, it's been traumatic. Part of why it's been traumatic is that what this has done is it's really revealed what the community means when they talk about live theatre. Because what we've discovered is that there is a difference between live performance and having a live audience. And I think when most people talk about live theatre, what they're actually talking about is having a live audience. Because, we've all seen live TV. And we've all learnt ways, like, I started a fortnightly thing I called Samsara Soiree, where my ensemble got together and just did monologues and stuff live, and we stream on YouTube and all that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's happened. First of all, there was several months where everyone just curled up into a terrified ball and rocked on the floor crying and wailing and going, oh my God, the world has ended, or at least the theatre world has ended.
Yeah.
And then, there have been the stalwart people who are absolutely, this is my art, I will not do it, I will not compromise it, I will not evolve it. It must exist on a stage in front of live people. And, that's entirely valid. If that is their art, that is their art.
Sure.
Then you've got other people who discovered that Zoom, basically, and Zoom has been the big winner out of all of this, really.
Well, they were doing this interview on Zoom too, so thanks, Zoom.
And they discovered that, these video conferencing systems that were always part of the corporate world were really good for things like play readings. And some people have managed to work out rehearsal processes. That has been compromised, because are you rehearsing for a show in front of a live audience on a stage, or are you rehearsing for, this confined digital world? And then it also turns out it can record, and then we discovered that it can link into, streaming and stuff. So there are some artists who have really kind of gone, oh, this can be something different about how my art is expressed.
Sure, yeah.
What it has done, though, it makes rehearsal really difficult. Well, not difficult, it's just a different kind of creativity. It's different problem solving. It is hard to understand what community means when community is virtual.
Sure, yeah.
And but having said that, the thing that saved me all through lockdown was my fortnightly Samsara Soiree, where I would actually get to meet with people online with a purpose, with a goal. It meant we had opening nights, and we had deadlines, and it was kind of, I lost my diary for 6 months because I had no appointments, and it ended up an archaeological excavation revealed it to be under my massage chair, because I do need it again now because things are starting to happen. That for me, that was my time. That was how I knew what day of the week it was, and it gave me a reason for existing, because without that I actually had nobody expected anything of me. And I didn't have anything to contribute to any conversations or anything, because if you say, what were you doing? Nothing. How is that different to what you did yesterday? It's not.
That's right. And time just kind of the days roll into each other, and unless you have some kind of purpose or direction or something to get
time was weird, because without a job, without kids that go to school,
Mm-hmm.
without any framework. On the plus side, with disability, this has been really good because I have some mobility issues.
Mm-hmm.
But on the downside is, there's been no structure. I had to impose a structure.
Yeah, you had to really dig deep to put your own things in place. When you said to me that it was traumatic, do you want to just explain a little bit about that term? What was sort of, what was the most traumatic in terms of your art and your legacy that you leave as a person in the world? What was it that was traumatic and about that experience?
Well, I've actually been able to be hugely productive through my podcast. Luckily, I had started a new podcast with a new idea, which was to showcase my writing, as in my plays and things. So it's given me the space to really explore my writing, and record it and put it out there for people to listen to. It's Samsara's Dramas, if anyone's listening, on all good podcatchers, free.
Go for it. Yeah.
But it was traumatic in that, I think anything that suddenly and instantaneously stops your life is traumatic.
Yeah.
I don't think you have to be physically abused or, in a car accident, or if your life stops and everything you had in place, I think that's traumatic. And I think it's a communal trauma that we all experienced. And I really noticed it because I review, and all of a sudden, like literally I went from one day where there were shows to see to the next day where all theatres were closed.
Yeah.
Also,
absolutely.
I had just won my first grant from a local council to create an art project, which was another podcast.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And literally the day after the announcement, the lockdown happened, and it was scheduled for the 25th of July, and it was part of like an open house, open city kind of project, kind of thing. And so obviously people were getting out about, so there was no open city thing. On the positive side, I haven't lost the project. It's just been
on hold,
put off to 2021. And given how we've done with lockdown and getting the virus under control, it is like, I reckon it's 99%
it's likely
to happen now.
Yeah.
And we got to keep the funding for it. So
congratulations.
Thank you. It was very exciting. It was like the first thing on my resume that I could say, I won funding, I won a grant.
Yeah, well done.
Somebody's paying me to create this art.
It's fantastic. I'm really happy for you. Thank you for sharing that information with us about how, I guess from what I'm hearing from you, is that you had to really just reorganize your thinking a lot in order to do what it is that you do and what it is that you love to do and how you like to create and how you like to meet that art community had to look a bit different.
I think I'm really lucky. I think whilst it kind of tore apart what I thought my life was, which was already torn apart by my car accident, which caused my injuries, which caused my disabilities, which changed my life.
Yeah.
So luckily, I was lucky on two counts. I've had this happen to me before. So your life stopping and having to rebuild something is something that I'm so familiar with. It was just like, we're doing this again. Okay.
Yeah.
And luckily what I had to build was so self-centered, not in a selfish kind of way, but all I've had is what I can do with myself. And so it just meant that all of that work that I had done was actually perfect for getting me through this next step. I had something, and it was entirely self-generated. And so the one thing I still had in my life was me. And so I could go, that's okay. I just have to remember that it's about me and that I matter. And hey, I'm the most important person in the world. And
and that was a familiar
I guess
platform.
that's a really big step to have to make, is that I matter enough to keep making things happen. And then it turns out that some of the things I did, like the soiree, became really important for the people around me. It gave a connection point for some of, my actor friends and stuff who didn't have that much, or, I have one friend who's a mother to a child on the spectrum, and the special schools closed, and she was just going crazy and overworked and overloaded, and she's in Bendigo too, so she was regional, and it just meant she could stay connected with us and with something that wasn't the trauma of her life, and gave her something, a place to tell her stories and stuff. So beautiful. Then it became, actually, this is important to other people. And which meant on those days where I didn't want to do it and I was struggling, it was like, you still got to do it, because if you don't do it, then, they lose their forum.
That's
and
right.
It's really important right now for everybody to get that relief and that connection and that laugh wherever they can.
So it was a beautiful multi-dimensional thing. It was a purpose for you, and it was an outlet for you and connection for you, but it was also a service to others and a gift to other people in creating that connection too.
Well, I hope so. And by doing that, it meant that I then had responsibility.
Yeah, that's
right.
And
so I couldn't totally self-indulge in, because there were a few times where I just really shut down. And it took everything, people talk about willpower. I think I finally actually understand what willpower is now at the ripe old age of 52. Where you just kind of like, it's not just a case of telling yourself you have to do it. It's fighting yourself to make it happen.
I think it's really important to talk about this stuff. We're going to get into the mental health section of the interview now. And I think that why I think it's important at the moment, particularly, and I'm trying to get this podcast out there, because I think that when people in the Northern Hemisphere are under similar restrictions and in a lockdown situation, how people actually do on a grass level root, how we get through these really difficult times with our own mental health issues and our own demons that we all carry, and all of these things that surface, how that's done, how that looks. So let's go into the mental health section. You've sort of, organically answered some of these questions anyway, but I'll go through them. Can you describe how you felt sort of, and again, it's hard to cast your mind back, as you were saying, to the beginning of 2020, but remembering what you felt at the onset of the whole COVID thing, the idea of coronavirus and this global pandemic at the start of the year. And then as we sort of moved through, sort of briefly, if you can, describe to us what that was like. A lot of people have said it's a bit of a corona coaster. Which is a great term. And then as more restrictions were placed on our lives, how that incrementally just kept building and affecting you. Can you walk us through that?
Look, I think I'm gonna plug the arts now, because I think for me the arts helped a lot, and more people should go and see what's out there, because for example, Arts House, which is an arts venue that's run by the City of Melbourne and have really focused on community participation type arts kind of stuff. We're running this project over a 3-year, I think there were 3 of them, and I've forgotten what it was called, but it was about catastrophes.
Oh yeah.
Each year is a different kind of catastrophe. And there was one year where it was about contagion, basically. And it got people in from government departments and funeral parlors and all sorts of things to create art and live artworks and discussions and stuff. And I just happened to go to one, reviewing, actually. I was a reviewer that they used frequently, that they allowed to engage with their work.
Yeah. And sorry, when was this, Samsara? When was this that you were?
This was 2018. This 2018, one that I went to.
So building into
that I'm specifically referring to. We had one that was about bushfires and that sort of stuff, and stuff. But the one in 2018 was about things like epidemics, and in fact, there was I learned about the Spanish flu at this live art event kind of thing, and through that I learned about epidemics and what social structures and what the health department does, and and all this sort of stuff through all these art interactions and engaging in all these activities. So weirdly, I was, in fact, if all of Melbourne had have gone, we all would have been prepared.
Yeah, that's it.
19. So for me, it was a shock, and it was absolutely shock how quickly it all happened. And I heard about this thing in China in December, and I had no idea what they were talking about. And then all of a sudden in March, it's like, oh, it's here and we're in lockdown. So I wasn't prepared in that way.
It was very quick. Yeah, it was very quick all of a sudden in Australia.
I understood a bit about epidemics and contagion and what our community or who in the community was going to be making decisions. And in my head, based on that, I thought we had a better plan in place. I've got to admit, it sounded like they were always running scenarios on these things. And
that's interesting,
It seems like apparently our politicians weren't speaking to the people who run all these scenarios or something. I don't know. They should have come to Arts House in that.
They should have done that. Exactly.
So this is where art is so important. We don't think about that. That art is the way we teach our community how to, Anyway,
sharing stories and actually exploring,
and sharing information in
scenarios,
fun and interactive ways.
Totally.
So I understood the existence of contagions and pandemics, and that somebody was like in charge of them.
Got it.
I also had the advantage that because I did have my own trauma, which totally made me have to rebuild a life, I had those skills. I think that's what people call resilience. Resilience is not a positive word. It's actually always, I think, associated with trauma, but I think that's what it is. I had some skills, and Absolutely. I was still on antidepressant medications for that. So I had chemicals to help me stay positive, and I'm pro medication when you need it. So, and I think this was a good time for it to be nice.
Yeah, definitely. The tools that you had there were already in place. Absolutely.
Yeah. So for me, whilst my life fell apart, I had a structure in place, and I had a knowledge of the existence of what an epidemic was. But this also then made some things really hard for me. So I got very, very angry at the population for their ignorance, which isn't their fault. I think we're not taught this stuff. I didn't know about the Spanish flu. I did, modern history for year 11 and 12, and I learned all about the world wars and all that sort of stuff. And I didn't learn there was a Spanish flu in the middle of it.
It's not true.
I think that's an important bit of history.
I think it is.
So I knew I was being unfair when I got angry, but I also got angry at the people who were fighting what the government put in place, because I've obviously watched the Titanic too often, and I keep coming back to this image of the musicians who kept playing while everyone was running to the lifeboats to help keep people calm and stuff. And so I was like, and I was thinking about World War I, where everyone was being, well, what we're told is, in Britain, they were being all hearty and strong and supporting their people on the front line, and, keeping spirits up. And I was like, well, there were two things. We've lost our arts community, whose job it is to keep people's spirits up. So then it's our job to keep our spirits up. And I felt like the moments I felt angriest and most frustrated and most depressed was when somebody was on TV saying, we shouldn't be doing this, and we should all just be out and about and stuff. And particularly when the rest of the country went, had stuff out. I mean, I truly believed that lockdown was the way to go.
Yeah. Okay. So you did agree. So you agreed with that. Yeah.
I know how viruses work. And I know, mistakes are made. Ruby Princess happened. The Victorian hotel disaster.
Yeah, which
mistakes happen.
Yeah, I just want to just describe that for listeners, just so they know what we're talking about.
Sorry.
That I think that you're referring to when the people that were in quarantine in a hotel for the 2-week period, that then they were coming back from overseas or wherever they were coming back from, were put into a hotel, and there was some fairly dodgy behaviour by the security company that was meant to be looking after them, that were apparently, were employed by our state government, and not really monitored that well, and not really, I guess, given the instructions that they were how to behave, or maybe they were given them, but they just weren't monitored in those, and were fraternizing with some of the people in the hotel, and then of course and someone had COVID and it spread, and that is that. So that narrative, that actual the discussion around that has caused a lot of controversy, hasn't it? Because so a lot of people do say that is when Victoria got into these big numbers of COVID, big numbers for us. But yeah,
there's two things. I mean, COVID really took hold in Australia when the cruise ship Ruby Princess pulled into Sydney, and they let the passengers off without quarantine, and so that was the big surge. And then people were traveling willy-nilly around the country. Then we went into the first lockdown, which was national, and that sort of got everything under control. But then in Victoria we had the quarantine, and the issue was there's two issues. There are people, Australian Defence Force offered services to manage the quarantines, and every state but Victoria took that up. Victoria decided to go with private security companies, but the private security companies have poor employment practices in terms of staff training and providing protective equipment, and so and it's all a casualized workforce. Basically the virus got out. One of the actual security people caught the virus, and in the northern suburbs, the large families, that's the corridor I'm in, the large families were not, even though we were out of the strict lockdown, we still had restrictions we were supposed to be living under, and people were ignored that and had large family gatherings, and then they went and visited friends and stuff, and so we had the second surge. And we started off with those northern suburbs being locked down, but again people were not sticking to the restrictions and were going outside of those suburbs, and we're still meeting in large families and stuff in other parts of Melbourne. And so eventually we had to have the whole city locked down, and then people weren't sticking to that, and they went out to the regional areas, and it got out to the regional areas, so then the whole state had to be locked down. And that's why I agreed with the lockdown, because basically, in my opinion, you couldn't trust the people to stick to, the rules that were in existence. And so the rules had to get harsher and harsher and harsher. And I did biology in school, so I know how viruses work. And also I have lung infections, so I'm always susceptible to viruses. And I know once you get one, they basically just have to die out. You can't use antibiotics and that sort of stuff. So in my opinion, based on the behavior of some people in the state, the whole state had to act. So that's why I wasn't
frustrated. There was a frustration there. Yeah, no, I hear you, and I can hear that.
And that's where my mental health was struggling, because I knew it was people who weren't doing the right, or who didn't understand how viruses work, that were allowing the virus to go free. And so all of the people who were then saying, oh no, and I know how herd immunity works, and without a vaccine, herd immunity doesn't work. So all of the herd immunity arguments, in my opinion, were based on ignorance of not understanding herd immunity. And yeah,
So
and as a vulnerable person with respiratory problems, I was like, well, my life matters. And yes, you have to go in lockdown so I have a chance to live.
Yeah. No, I hear that. Yeah. And I think that's what I'm hearing from you, is that there was quite a lot of frustration around the different opinions and different ways that people were taking on the information that we were given. And on a deep level for you, you were actually feeling not only frustrated, but quite worried that actually that would have a really devastating impact on your own life as well as for the community.
Yeah, I mean, I'd already not died once, and I was kind of thinking it would be nice to not die again.
Yeah.
You know, I don't have a perfect life. I'm not a perfect person. I'm not saying I'm a benefit to the community, but I kind of want to stay alive as long as I can.
Yes, absolutely. And I think, and I thank you for your honesty with that. And I think that's a really valid valid point to make. And this is where the variety of experiences and a variety of opinions and the conversations around the perspectives that people had and why are really important. So totally. So so basically your corona coaster, or the points the roller coaster that was kind of going through dealing with the restrictions and dealing with what was actually occurring in our community, you were basically kind of feeling that you were at times a little bit angry and a little bit frustrated with the community at large. And how were you hearing about these people's opinions? Were you sort of seeing it out in your daily lives and kind of meeting that on a physical level, perhaps when you did get out to go shopping, or was it social media, or was it your networks in the arts community?
A bit of everything. I did see it when I was out shopping, because again, I'm mobility impaired. I'm not one of those people who could go for the hour jog that we were allowed to do. Or
that's right.
I don't have a dog, so I wasn't taking the dog out for a walk. So the only reason I was allowed to leave my flat was to get groceries. And technically, yes, I could have had them delivered, but then I would never have left my flat.
That's
and
right.
My mental health needed that. That was my one concession. And then I would go to shopping centres sometimes and just kind of either see people not wearing their masks, or seeing people just breaking the rules, like sitting around chatting, which we weren't allowed to do for a while there. Like you just had to go and then come back, kind of thing. And and I would get frustrated because it's like, didn't do the right thing the longer we were going to be in lockdown. And it's just, I mean, I'm a bit of a literal person anyway. If you tell me that's the rules, I'm going to do the rules.
Interesting to notice. Interesting to note.
But also the news drove me nuts. Just not so much. I mean, I really became a real fan of ABC over this period, which is for overseas people, is our national broadcaster, the Australian Broadcasting Commission, because of all of the commercial channels and stuff, it was the least inflationary in terms of fighting the lockdown, and there was less fake news. I hate Donald Trump, but I'll tell you what, in lockdown we had so much fake news. My family in South Australia watch Sky News, and there's so many arguments about the rubbish that was on Sky News, both about the virus but also about what was happening in Victoria. The stuff that went out on the commercial channels in other states were about Victoria and about what Victorians were thinking and feeling and doing was just so false and misleading.
It was an interesting time. It's good to note too here, and I don't know if I've said this before in a previous interview, but it's good to note for overseas listeners again, and maybe even some Australians that may not be aware, that News Corp owns 75% of media, and so news and information in Australia is owned predominantly by the Rupert Murdoch News Corp group. So we have a very biased news and information service. So the Australian Broadcasting Service, the ABC, which is under great funding cuts constantly. unfortunately, and kind of having to curtail to the whims of a lot of people now. So yeah, basically we have the ABC, but most of our other mainstream news channels and stuff are predominantly owned by one company, really.
They also then have the commercial interests of, without retail and stuff, then there's no advertising dollars and stuff. So their news and reporting on this was very much influenced by their commercial interests, which were strongly, their income was curtailed. But the other thing I got really annoyed at was the inflammatory language. They were all the social media, the right-wing commentators and stuff were, coined the phrase dictator Dan. And there were all of these references to, him being like Hitler or Stalin. And that made me angry because I do know my history. I'm actually of Dutch European descent. So I was around, I wasn't around, my family engaged with Hitler in real life. And that sort of thing. And it's like, no, this is not what that is.
Sure.
And to inflate this to that level was I have post-traumatic stress from my car accident 10 years ago with anxiety and depression, and all of that stuff was inflaming my anxiety in particular. And and then there were people that were going on about how lockdown is really bad for mental health and all that sort of stuff. And it's like, yeah, absolutely, but you know what, when you're in lockdown and you don't have a choice and you have to be in there, all of this rhetoric makes the mental health situation worse, whereas kind of our more rah-rah, we can do this, guys, yes, it's hard, and let's get out of this as quick as we can, would have helped so much more.
Sure. Thank you for that. Yeah, I hear you. I totally hear you. So you're saying a bit more positivity would have then given you particularly, and other people that were really struggling at the time, a lot more wind underneath their sails, just kind of get through it instead of the
or at least not such hyperbolizing,
weaponized language.
Okay, if okay, we can argue against the lockdown, but let's not invoke Stalin and Hitler.
Got it.
We can say it's going to be really hard for kids in school, but let's not say it's ruined their rest of their entire life and their academic career forever, kind of thing. Let's say what's going on and say what we think. I'm not against that. I believe in debate, but the hyperbolizing of was just horrendous. And was really the thing that was hardest on my mental health. It was like, say what it is, but don't hyperbolize it. Don't make this. There are so many more greater catastrophes, and it does not help us to get through hard times to say these are the worst of times.
Yeah, I hear you. Understand.
In my opinion. Opinion, I know other people disagree with me.
No, but that's what this interview is. It's your personal
and I don't have commercial interests.
No.
All I lost was like a lifestyle.
Sure.
And and I don't have dependents. So
no, thank you for that.
I understand. My perspective is a selfish one.
It's your own unique perspective, though, and I thank you for sharing that. And what with these in mind, the feelings that you were experiencing, and so some of those triggered experiences that you had. What did you do what are the things that you did to cope with those feelings? Some of those tools that you had in your toolkit, or even extra things that you hadn't tried before, or things like that. What did you do to get through those times where you're feeling that way?
For 10 years, ironically, I stopped seeing my psychologist regularly just before COVID hit. That was probably a mistake.
Yeah.
But we had done a lot of work together, and I think the work that we had done helped me a lot. In particular, one of the things that she used to say about me was that I was tenacious. And so, I have faced many barriers in my life, gender, health, academic, and pretty much my I was basically, if you tell me I can't do something, I'm going to give it a try, unless there's like a really good reason. Like, I accept I'm never going to run a marathon. I got that. Not going to try. So for me, telling me that because we're in lockdown we can't do theatre was like, for me, just this
red rag to a bull. Was it a red rag to a bull?
Like, huh? So that's how, I made myself. I'm not technical, and I have some processing flaws, and stuff. But it was like, no, you're telling me I can't record my podcast? And so I learned, how to make Zoom work for me. And its features, and then it was like, what, we can't do live performance? And so I made the soiree, and I made all of my active friends, or the ones that wanted to engage with me, learn how to use Zoom. And we have many a flawed product, and the more negative stuff that came at me, the more I was like, oh no, okay, the soiree, it's just a variety show thing. I accept the argument that that's not theatre. And so it's like, okay, we're going to make some theatre. So we ended up doing a musical through the soiree called the Soiree-sical. And then Fringe wasn't going to happen. And I had this idea to put on a play in Fringe, and it's like, you're not telling me I can't do Fringe. So now we're doing Samsara Sing Sing, which is Soiree-sical the sequel.
Okay, so you just turned it into creativity. You just kept going and turning it into art.
It's like, you're telling me I can't do this, and you're not giving me something else I can do. So I'm doing it. And it's been a technical nightmare. The things that I have had to learn about streaming, about programming, and these are not my strong suits. And it's like, but I'm not sitting here and turning into a lump of potato, because those people in the world of podcasting can't see this, but I am very large. I could potentially be mistaken for a potato, but it's like, this potato is going to keep doing stuff.
Sure.
In fact, it potentially could be that with lockdown ending, I may never have a place in this world again, and maybe this was my bright shining moment. But it's like, no, you know what? I'm just going to keep writing, and I'm going to give my friends things that they can do, so that they don't end up in a big hole. And because that's my job as an artist, that's my job. I keep community going when the world is telling it to stop. That is one of the very important things that art is supposed to do for us. It gives us a dream, it gives us a vision, it gives us a purpose. And I'm going to do that. That's my job, and that's all that I can do.
Right, got it. And thank you. You turned your, it was grist for the mill, and you turned your the darker days and the darker feelings that you had into content and inspiration, and you put it, that's where you put it. So those are the things that you did to cope with.
Absolutely. It's all I can do. All I have in my life, or have had for 6 months, is a tiny little flat and a computer. And me. And it's like, I can make that as small or as big as I can make it. And I didn't want to go small. I spend my life being small in the world, or not small in my body, but small in the world. And it's like, no, you know what? I am going to expand my bubble as much as I can for this one shining moment where the world needs me.
Oh, wow.
The world needed me for once. I was going to do something.
Yeah, it was your hero's journey. Yes, well done.
yes, it was.
Yeah, I'm hearing it. Well, thank you. And so just moving through the last few questions of the mental health section now, what were, I know you've said you're a stickler for the rules and that's always been something that you have, that you've been.
Yeah, I'm that person.
That's
Sorry.
Okay. But no apologies.
Somebody has to be.
Well, that's it. Were there any things that you did that were against the social restrictions put in place to help yourself? I ask everybody this question. I can imagine that you're probably going to say, no, there wasn't actually, but yeah, was there?
No, I'm not that good. I am not I'm not any kind of role model person.
So there were things that you did that were against the rules, so to speak.
Absolutely. Yeah. I potentially went to the shops more times than I ought to have. That was absolutely necessary.
For mental health reasons,
I might not have
absolutely.
needed to go to buy groceries every second day.
You might not have, but you weren't going for that jog, as you said, so you had to get out somehow. Yeah.
And also, it didn't even occur to me until about halfway through that I might have been breaking the rules because I'm in a flat and we've got a shared laundry and, you've got the letter boxes and stuff. And I wasn't wearing my mask whenever I kind of went down to those communal areas. Nobody was there. I was very, very careful about that. But, afterwards I thought, oh, maybe that's classified as going outside. So potentially that was bad. And I kept trying to use my keep cup if I went and got a coffee. So when I do my shopping, I'd sometimes go to coffee shops, which were still open, and I kept wanting to use my keep cup. And then I did find a cafe that would do keep cups. And well,
that's an interesting point to note for other people that might not be aware of that. And I think the environment has really suffered in this time too, because there's so much
the coffee cup problem.
And the disposable masks. Yeah, they're everywhere.
I did discover something, though. For places that can't do keep cups, because I'm in a mobility scooter, I need my keep cup as much to stop my coffee from falling.
With the lid.
Else.
Yeah.
And because they're terrible. They don't work. They seriously don't work. And for a while there, I was suffering. Like my coffee got washed in. My scooter got washed in coffee many, many times.
Oh no!
In fact, my current set of masks has coffee in the corner where they'd spilled over into there. Anyway, but what I've come to realize, so anybody out there with disability who's entering lockdown and doesn't know what to do about the whole keep cup trauma,
here's a hot tip.
Here's a hot tip. You take your keep cup with you. You buy the coffee in that horrible thing that they give you, and then just pour it into your keep cup.
Yes.
It's so simple, but it took me 3 months to work that one out.
Okay. Yeah. You refine the process, don't you, as you go along? Yeah.
Well, somebody's got to be the pioneer. And if I can help Europe, if I can help the disabled in Europe, or even the environmentally conscious in Europe, you're still going to have that cup.
Unfortunately, no, it doesn't help the environment.
It doesn't help the environment.
But that's okay.
But it might help the disabled.
Yes, there's something. Some people will be helped by this. Thank you. So there was a few things that you had to do that was sort of a little bit outside, but generally speaking, you were quite happy to toe the line.
Yeah, I did need my little rebellions.
Yeah.
But I guess that's also part of the coping strategy is
it is.
Find the rebellions that probably won't hurt anybody and no one will ever know about.
Yeah.
So that, you can stick to the rules that are important.
That work for you. Yes. So on a scale of 1 to 10, can you rank your lowest state of mental health over the course of 2020? And then again, what your highest ranking was during this time? Just trying to get a little bit of a
Sure. Look, range. I did get very low. I would probably say 2. Assuming 1 is suicidal, or is
that's what I was. Yeah, no, I think you're right. 1 is suicidal.
Look, there was a really brief moment about a month before lockdown eased, where I was probably at a 2, and I do know what 1 feels like. So 2. Highest moment. Look, probably 8 or 9.
Wow, that's a really big band, isn't it? Really big range.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, nice.
But no, the other trick to getting through this is really celebrate the good things, really
Totally.
celebrate the little wins. And,
yeah.
And you've got to treat yourself kindly. And again, because I have post-traumatic stress,
yes,
I do tend to have quite a wide emotional band that I exist within. And part of the stuff that I've been doing with my psychologist is really kind of be kind to yourself when you're struggling, and celebrate the wins. And they're small and they might just be a win for you, but nobody else in the world would ever think it was important. But celebrate the little wins, because they are wins.
Totally. Yes, good advice. Very good advice. And did you feel connected to you? I think you've answered this anyway, but through your connections with friends and your social networks that you already had established, did you feel that you had those really decent connections with those people still via Zoom or via the different sort of avenues or channels that you needed to take to get to them? And yeah, how did you maintain those connections? Was it was it on the phone, or was it more around the Zoom and the things that you were doing, the theatre stuff and all that thing?
I don't like telephones. I have some workplace bullying issues in my past, and so telephones are not my favorite means of communication. So I actually found Zoom to me feels different to a telephone, and so I've actually blossomed through Zoom, I think.
Sounds like it.
It also gave me a reason to put on makeup and brush my teeth.
Yes,
and
it does.
Brush my hair, which, again, as a person living alone, I didn't have any of those in my life. So Zoom really gave me that sort of thing.
The visual,
I've actually made new friends because of gatherings I've gone to on Zoom. And stuff. But one thing I did realize yesterday, I got a haircut and I got a pedicure, because we're allowed to do that now. And I'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched, literally forgotten.
Yes.
And so that was the first time in months that I've had actual human touch. And I just forgot that little frizz-on that you feel when somebody else touches you. And it's possibly not important, I don't know, but it was nice.
No, it is important. And actually, we were going to be talking about how you met your needs for connection and intimacy, if you did, through this time. And I'm assuming here that you are not in a relationship. And I'm assuming, so I'm assuming you weren't in a relationship for the 2020 period. How did you feel as a single person in this year, which has been difficult for everybody in or out of relationship? And it's really an interesting one, because I've talked previously on this program to 4 other people so far, and they've all been in relationships and longer relationships as well. So I'm really interested to hear from someone who hasn't been in a relationship in that time and how that has felt.
Look, I don't know. I'm probably not a typical person, and that might skew this program for you, because I, ever since my car accident and the PTSD and the anxiety and the depression, I've had a really, really low sex drive anyway.
Sure, yeah.
So, it's sex hasn't been a big
focus point.
Me.
A big focus point, yeah. But intimacy and connection is in that too, isn't it? And as you were saying with the physical touch element, just that loss of energy around you and intimacy and connection on that physical level, yeah.
Yeah, I kind of miss hugs, and it has been a bit harder. I mean, I have friends and connect in all sorts of different ways, and some of them have been strengthened and some have kind of just disappeared and stuff. But I miss hugs, and
Absolutely.
I think it's really easy to really, if you're on your own and you don't have people around you, it's really easy to think that you're not important to anybody. And that's when you kind of really need to do the whole mantra of you're important to yourself, and that's all that matters. And again, luckily for me, I did have 10 years of psychology sessions behind me to really trust that I am important in myself. And that's not a ongoing belief thing, but I have tools where if I'm in a certain state of mind, I remember that I've had 10 years of psychology sessions.
Yeah.
You know, that
you have
that
those
ought to give me something to lean on. And the weirdest thing is, one of my problems is I don't believe in tomorrow. And that doesn't mean I think I'm going to die. It's a different kind of statement, but that absolute certainty that we all have in our lives that tomorrow is going to come, whatever that is, I don't actually have that.
Yeah. So you're more present in the moment. Is that what you're sort of present?
Yeah, it's kind of, and that's why I've been so productive in a way, is because for me to go, I'll wait for the lockdown to be over and then I'll get back into everything, doesn't exist. So it's like, well, if I want to tell a story or if I want to do something, I have to do it now.
Yeah.
So I have to find a way to do it now, because there may not be a lockdown is over kind of thing for me. So there's this sense of urgency to everything I do, which compromises it a lot. But I also have learned over the last 10 years to give up on the idea of perfection, which helps a lot too, because the idea of compromising what I want the outcome to be is okay, because if there's no tomorrow, at least something exists and was done and happened. It's a very complicated thing. It's ridiculous to say that having experienced life-altering trauma made the lockdown. And I would not say go out and, have a traffic accident before the next lockdown.
That's not a process that you were advocating for. But however, it does help you have those tools in your toolkit because you've got those neural pathways and you've been there before. Absolutely.
So which should be heartening to anyone who's gone into lockdown and who doesn't have those tools. It's like, it's okay, because it is just a matter of tools. Yeah. So the tip is, find those tools. There are tools, they will get you through it. Yeah. You just have to know that they exist and to, find somebody who can give it. So get mental health support. Get it. See a psychologist through this, because there's ways to do this, and you need help. You won't, it may be hard to find them yourself.
Absolutely. Good advice. Are you looking forward to having a hug again? Have you had a hug again?
No, I haven't had a hug yet. I have had lunch with a friend, but didn't do the hug. Because I don't have a bubble person, and they have their bubble people. And so...
Yeah. Do you want to describe for listeners what a bubble person is, just in case they don't know that term?
So basically, this term has sort of come out of, there are a number of people that you can have in your life that you don't have to be careful with because they are always in your life. So for families, it may, you can have one friend, for example, who could come and visit, and you won't need to distance from them because they'll become your bubble person, and that's the only person you can probably have. The difficulty I do have is that most of my friends have close family or children or whatever, so their bubble is already full. So I don't have a bubble person. So your bubble person might be your person you're dating, for example. That might be your bubble person, and where you can just
sorry to interrupt you. I was just going to say, and this was implemented sort of in the last part of lockdown I think, wasn't it, the bubble person? It wasn't all the way through in the stage 4 restrictions that we had here in Victoria. I think on because of the response to mental health and the need for the community to feel, for people that are single or living alone particularly, the need for them to be able to have somebody that they could actually share space with.
Yeah, I think we didn't have it in the first national lockdown.
No.
And out of that arose the awareness that we needed it. So when Victoria went into lockdown, you could have one bubble person, and now I think your bubble can increase to include family members and relatives and stuff. And
we're doing a slow emergence, actually. That's good to notice as well. I think that for this program right now, and it's November, we've been in lockdown in Victoria since March, and there's different stages of that, and now we're emerging from it. But there is a roadmap, as they say, out of it. And so we can incrementally increase our amount of people that we can see. We can have 10 people. I think at the moment we can have 10 people in the back garden or in our or outside you can gather, but only a couple of families. And so
it's five people if it's friends, 5 people from 2 different families or something like that. And it's very confusing.
And that's really good to notice. Like, look at us, we're talking about the lockdown that we're actually in and emerging from it in our roadmap, and it's clearly on the website. We could look at this, but we're so confused still because it's been there's been so many changes. Like every week or two there's a new announcement, and you kind of go, oh, where are we at now? So it's actually a bit of more of a consciousness emergence, isn't it? It's like, well, what do we feel?
And I just kind of feel like everybody has their bubbles. They have higher priority people. My family are in a different state, so I pretty much just work on the idea that I will wait to be invited into people's bubbles because they will have a list of priorities of the people they need to bring into their bubbles, and eventually my name will be on the list. And
eventually eventually we'll be out, and hopefully over the summer we'll be able to just mingle as normal.
And it's really exciting because now we can, as of last weekend, we can have up to 20 people in a theatre or a cinema.
That rule you do know.
Activity. And my reviewing activity, people have started contacting me, so that means I'm going to have reasons to it's still online, mostly online, but it means that I'm still on the reviewer list, which means eventually I'm going to have a show that I can go to.
Fantastic. That is good, Samsara.
I'm just waiting for the invitations, and they will come as restrictions ease. Invitations to lunches and to shows and
great. And your life was it'll slowly start to come back to more physical contact with people. That's great. Thank you for sharing that. So just the last couple of things that we're going to talk about before the end of the interview is on a big sort of scale here, what are your observations and concerns, if any, about the impact of COVID-19 on not just you and your family and friends in the community, but let's talk a bit more broadly about Australia as a country and also globally. Do you have any concerns, or do you feel like you're actually just living in, as you said, in that present moment of let's just wait and just kind of things are playing out in the moment a little bit?
No, I do have concerns. I think I'm really disappointed. I think one of the biggest problems that we've had in Australia is education. It seems like nobody knew about the Spanish flu, so there's a real problem with how we teach history, and not just Australian history. I mean, that happened around the world as well. And as I said, we learned about World War I and World War II, but we didn't learn about the Spanish flu. And so in our consciousness, in our education, we don't have any reference to, something of this sort. And I just think, well, how many other things that could happen to us have we left out because it hasn't met the political patriarchal rah thing that didn't involve a gun, so therefore we didn't learn about it. Good point. Put my feminist hat on there for a moment. But also and I think if we knew more about our history, we would respond better when it repeats, because history does repeat.
Yes, it does.
So I also I worry that we revere competitive team sports so much in Australia. I think there's a myth that team sports like football, and in particular the various codes of football, build teamwork and all that sort of stuff. But I think what's become really evident is that what is built into our psyche is for and against, a pro and a con, a sense that you have to fight and there's always a winner and a loser. And I think that's really come through in the debate that has emerged around COVID-19 and how to deal with it, and is really evident in our politics, which has become so adversarial. Even it can be bicameral without being so adversarial, but this whole thing of you're on one team or you're on another and you've got a winner and you've got a loser, I think that's really shown up, and that's really impeded how we've responded. And I think these are things we really have to look at. And it's really hard to work as a community when there's a right side and a wrong side, and there's a good and a bad, and there's these are my gang colors.
Sure.
And I just think those are things that we need to look at, and and look to the arts. We had an instruction manual in Victoria on how to deal with pandemic. If people had gone to the theatre and seen the shows, we would have been prepared. Less football, more arts.
That's your absolutely. That's your advice to the community right now. Definitely.
Hell yeah.
I hear you.
Although Europe doesn't need that advice. They support and go and see theatre and arts and stuff way more than we ever will in Australia. So well, they're probably, and they probably remember the Spanish flu.
They may do, yeah. I know it's been an interesting new virus in town, hasn't it? Definitely. So thank you for those thoughts. How do you think you'd feel if you were told we were about to go into another lockdown maybe next March? What's the instant response in your body or your mind when you hear that?
It's okay. If we've got to do it, we've got to do it.
Yeah.
I still think, not even just my life, I think, I think of all of the life experience and wisdom we've lost with so many of our elderly people having passed away, and they were the worst that were affected. And it's like, again, in Australia we don't respect in white Australia, I should clarify that, in white Australia we don't respect our aged, and we don't listen to the wisdoms that they have to share. You never know. They might have heard about pandemics before too. Just saying. Yeah. But they all died in the pandemic.
Right, yeah. Yeah. So you're just advocating for a little bit more voice given to the elderly in our society, and and a resignation of, in order to protect those people, if we need to go into another lockdown, that's actually really important.
And again, it all comes back to debate and history. So learning.
Yes.
And, you can learn from the elderly, and, you can hear and listen to what they have to say and talk about their ideas, as much as, we're very much a youth culture, and that's understandable. It's where the energy and drive and innovation comes from.
We're obsessed with it. Yes.
But you need,
biodiversity. You need biodiversity.
You need to know your past before you can move forward, or else you will just, as I say, those old adages are right. You are doomed to repeat your past if you don't learn from it.
Yes.
And the way to learn from it is to listen.
Yeah. And that's right. Yeah.
Hear it. Learn it.
Wise words. Thank you. My final question.
Go and see theatre.
Oh, and go and see theatre, yes. One more plug for the arts just before our final question. So I think that's really important. Thank you for sharing those things and yeah, plugging the arts. Absolutely. Was there a particular image or a dream, speaking of the subconscious and the psyche, that was recurring for you through this time?
Yeah, the Titanic.
Yeah, I've heard you say that before. I thought that might have been.
The musicians playing while the Titanic was going down.
Yeah.
That for me was, for some reason, just the real the thing I just kept coming back to in terms of it's, I think that was, and I think it says it all really. It's ship's going down, but keep calm.
Yeah, right.
There's things you can't change. What you can change is what you do while they're happening.
Got it. Yeah. Thank you. That's a really unique, and everybody's got their own unique images or things that came to them through this time, and it does summarize a lot of what you've said really well. So thank you. And
I'm also kind of crazy, so
I think we all are.
I'm probably going to give you something that's not quite what other people are saying.
No, everybody's got their own. It's interesting. Everybody's got their own thing. Don't you worry. I think we've all definitely touched into. The word crazy is such a loaded term, isn't it? But we've all touched into craziness this year.
Well, a good thing is we are all crazy, it goes back into this. Hopefully, the other thing, this is really important. The other thing that really hit me hard was, oh my God, we now see how hard isolation is. Can we now please have more compassion for prisoners and refugees who we've locked up in detention?
Yes.
Anyone who's locked up in detention, I get it. You know, if they're prisoners have committed a crime, refugees haven't committed a crime.
Absolutely not.
Doubly as horrible. But anyone in isolation is struggling. So, you know, if we could just have a tiny bit more compassion for those two groups of people, that would be huge.
Thank you for saying that, Samsara, and I completely agree with what you've just said. It's been lovely to speak with you today. I'm going to wrap up the interview.
Sorry, I waffle on a bit.
No. And yeah, thank you for exploring what life's been like for.
And thanks for doing this podcast. Yeah. I think it's really important, and it is really important for us to remember what we thought and did in these times, but also, Europe is going into lockdown again, and I reckon America will go in once Biden is in place. They're going to go into some form of lockdown. So the more we can share the experiences and allow everyone who's going through it realize that what they're thinking and feeling is okay, it's valid, and you know, it's normal. Yeah. It's normal to be abnormal in my case.
Absolutely. Well, it is. Yeah. It is.
And you know, and even though I don't believe in tomorrow, it will come. And you know, just do what you have to do and treat yourself kindly.
Thank you. Yeah. Thanks. And thanks for your part in this conversation and the sharing of stories. It's really appreciated by me, and I'm sure the rest of the world as well. So really appreciate your time today, Samsara.
Loved you all. Come see my show or listen to my podcast.
Yeah. Do you want to just
dramas?
Samsara's dramas.
If you want to see into my crazy mind,
yeah,
listen to Samsara's dramas.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Lockdown Stories from Inside. I hope you've enjoyed this interview, and it's provided you with plenty of food for thought and the opportunity to expand your understanding of the breadth of human experience. Thank you for lending your ears as we walked a mile in someone else's shoes. See you next time.